The Skarn Dominion had conquered over 50 species before humanity. None had posed a true challenge. Some fought back with pride and defiance. Others begged for mercy. But all had fallen. When they reached the human frontier, they expected nothing different. The report said Earth was a chaotic death world, but the Skarn had burned entire biospheres before. Primitive environments were nothing compared to Skarn firepower. The initial incursion fleet descended onto a colony on Tau Ceti IV, expecting a quick and brutal subjugation. Instead, they were greeted with laughter, not from entertainers or panicked children, but from armed defenders, lean, calm-eyed humans with improvised gear, standing in front of jury-rigged defenses. The first wave of Skarn soldiers was met not with cries or screams, but with a strange, mocking cadence echoing through the comms. Human laughter. At first, they believed it was a cultural fear response. Skarn analysts labeled it defensive hysteria. They had no concept of human gallows humor, no grasp of sarcasm in the face of annihilation. The Skarn were about to learn. Within the first 2 hours, 8 dropships were destroyed mid-descent by anti-aircraft weapons the humans had mounted on mining platforms. Skarn Command was irritated, not alarmed. Losing troops to backwater primitives was an embarrassment, not a threat. So they sent in ground forces to secure the region. Skarn heavy infantry advanced under armor screens, cutting down trees, buildings, anything that might serve as cover. Then the audio recordings started coming in. Body cams caught it. The sound of high-speed rotation, like a distant turbine, followed by the scream of kinetic impacts. Troops vanished in sprays of blood and armor fragments. 3 squads in 20 seconds. No warning, no muzzle flash. Just spinning metal and silence. In orbit, Command reviewed the footage. The source was unclear. The camera that managed the last 10 seconds longer showed a vaguely tripod-shaped device embedded in a ridgeline. Sleek, black, rotating barrels glinting in sunlight. No heat signature. No energy pulse. No lasers. Bullets. Thousands of them. High-density tungsten. Fired at 3,000 rounds per minute. The humans called it Murder Box. It wasn't even manned. The prototype had been built as a remote defense unit to deter wild predators in deep space mining colonies. It had never been intended for war. And yet, in this first encounter, it had eviscerated 117 elite Skarn troops in less than 3 minutes. Skarn analysts were stunned, not just by the weapon's power, but by its sheer simplicity. No advanced targeting AI, just motion sensors, vibration detection, ballistic computation, and a belt-fed ammunition system. It didn't jam. It didn't miss. It didn't care. They authorized an orbital strike. Precision plasma lances were fired to melt the murder box and the surrounding area. But by then, the humans had already moved 3 more into different positions. When the second Skarn ground wave moved in, they brought ECM shielding and stealth units. That didn't help. The murder boxes didn't rely on electronic signatures. They used old-school optical tracking. And when the first one opened fire again, the humans monitoring the feed in their distant command posts laughed harder. That was when the Skarn started to understand. The laughter wasn't fear. It was confidence, arrogance, fury wrapped in humor. It wasn't the weapon they feared. It was the intent behind it. These humans weren't trying to survive. They were enjoying themselves. Skarn troops began refusing deployment orders to the Tau Ceti front. Commanders rotated units in and out every 20 hours to limit exposure stress. Several soldiers developed psychosomatic hearing disorders, phantom spinning sounds, followed by the feeling of being watched. Therapists called it barrel trauma. One unit abandoned its post entirely after seeing a flock of birds startled by nothing. They assumed it was another automated turret and fled. Their commander executed 5 of them before order was restored. More murder boxes appeared. Then came modified versions. Mobile platforms mounted on wheeled chassis. Some could follow heat signatures. Others would target only Skarn bioforms. Keyed to smell. The humans had no centralized strategy. Just a flood of engineers, tinkerers, and mad inventors. Each prototype worse than the last, for the Skarn. On a recon mission, a Skarn tech analyst cracked into a human field log. One message stood out written by an operator monitoring turret performance. I gave her a name, Jenny. She sings to them, and they always dance. The message ended with a series of laugh emojis. The Skarn had no translation for that. They assumed it was some kind of code. Later, the base that message came from was wiped out by Skarn retaliatory strike. But the turrets were already gone. They deployed countermeasures, gravitic pulses, EMPs, firestorms. But the humans adapted faster. They coated wires with shielding, buried their units in water. They rigged power from windmills, geothermal vents, even batteries pulled from disabled mechs. The murder boxes didn't die. They multiplied. In one instance, a Skarn team disabled a turret only to find it was a decoy. The real one activated as they examined the fake. They died screaming, and the audio feed caught one last thing, a human voice saying, "That one's name was Lucy. You just pissed her off." Soon, human broadcasts were intercepted. They weren't calling for help. They were exchanging turret schematics, field notes, ammo upgrades. One technician suggested fitting thermobaric payloads into the rounds. Another mentioned coating bullets in neurotoxin to spice things up. The Skarn had never faced a species that weaponized boredom. Skarn High Command convened an emergency strategy session. The term deathworlder was used for the first time in official capacity. Prior mentions had been buried in xenobiology research. No one had taken the label seriously. But now, deathworlder wasn't just a term. It was a warning. They brought in historical researchers to review Earth's past. What they found chilled them more than any weapon. Thousands of years of war, recorded genocides, firebombing, napalm, mass automation of death. And in every century, laughter, morbid, bitter, unrelenting. Humans laughed in the trenches, in gas masks, during orbital bombardment drills. They joked about extinction. The laughing wasn't insanity. It was defiance. But then something changed. After the siege of Bastion Ridge, where over 300 Skarn soldiers were torn apart in 3 minutes by a ring of 11 rotating cannon turrets, the human communications went silent. No more jokes. No more broadcasts. No more laughter. Skarn scouts returned to investigate. The area was empty. No bodies. No defenses. Just brass casings and scorched rock. At the center of the ridge was a data drive. It contained one audio file. A human voice spoke clearly. "We don't laugh when we're serious." Panic erupted in Skarn Command. They couldn't locate the turrets. They couldn't track human troop movements. Every attempted advance ended in slaughter. And now, the enemy was quiet, focused, efficient. The last Skarn colonel stationed at Tau Ceti forewrote in his final report. The humans are not fighting for territory. They are not fighting for revenge. They are demonstrating. Their laughter was a courtesy, a chance to leave. We didn't take it. Now, the laughter has stopped. The Dominion's command structure was not built to endure chaos. It was rigid, formal, dependent on hierarchy and predictability. Against any normal enemy, that was enough. Against humans, it was a death sentence. The first cracks were small, isolated to local fleets that faced turret networks and guerrilla strikes. But the contagion spread faster than their analysts could predict. Soon, entire battle groups stalled in orbit, unsure whether the world beneath them was worth the risk. Skarn High Admiral Trixar convened a council of the fleet lords to force a strategic recalibration. They would no longer attempt to conquer. They would annihilate selectively, demonstrating overwhelming force, demoralizing the humans into submission. The first target was Delta Auriga, a system with 5 human settlements and minimal defenses, according to old Dominion intelligence. The fleet entered orbit with little resistance. Atmospheric scans revealed no energy readings typical of defensive grids. Confident, Trixar authorized ground deployment to begin. The first transports descended through thick cloud cover, cutting through turbulence with military precision. They touched down without incident. It was only after disembarking that the Skarn realized the ground was wrong. Not soil, not natural rock. It was a field of compressed, metallic dust layered by human hands. Every step compressed the particles into conductive lines. The first explosion took out a dropship. Static discharges ignited hidden capacitors buried just centimeters below the surface. A web of electrical fires spread, leaping from one landing zone to another. Trixar watched helplessly as his soldiers burned. Attempts to lift off triggered proximity mines woven into the atmosphere itself. Micro-drones seeded to detect descent vectors. They had turned the entire planet into a trap. No human forces appeared. No defensive emplacements. No surrender offers. Just the silent, systematic destruction of everything that touched the ground. Faced with total loss of 3 divisions, Trixar ordered an immediate orbital bombardment of the entire planet. It was a coward's move, but he had no choice. Better to erase the evidence than let it fuel the growing terror within the Dominion ranks. Delta Auriga's third planet was reduced to glass. But as the fleet withdrew, another message slipped through their comms, one not from their own forces. It was a simple audio file in human standard. The voice was calm, almost amused. You fought the dust. What will you do against the stars? Panic spread faster than the orders to suppress it. Every new engagement was now treated as a potential suicide mission. Ships refused to land without full orbital clearance. Ground teams demanded the right to refuse deployment if unusual sensor readings were detected. Some captains simply deserted, abandoning their assignments entirely. The Dominion tried to hide the scale of the collapse. Censorship squads were deployed. Officers were executed for cowardice in highly public trials. But the humans had anticipated this response. They broadcast messages across subspace frequencies, targeting Dominion civilian channels. Carefully edited footage of Skarn defeats, human trap designs, and the slow, creeping terror infecting every level of command. Entire world began to riot. Colonies on the galactic frontier declared neutrality, refusing to send resources to sustain a doomed war. Internal communications were flooded with memes of spinning turrets, dead ships, and gravestones marked, "Here lies Dominion pride." In desperation, the Dominion leadership escalated. They authorized the construction of the Annihilator fleets. Ships the size of moons, carry enough firepower to crack a planet's crust and wipe out every living thing. Humanity's resistance, they reasoned, had persisted because it was allowed to. This would end it. The Annihilator called Wrath of Skarn was sent to the human colony on Tau Ceti 4. Scans revealed nothing unusual. No turrets, no weapons grids, no active resistance. It seemed abandoned. Wrath of Skarn prepared to fire its main weapon. A single transmission interrupted the targeting cycle. It contained coordinates. They pointed not at Tau Ceti 4, but at Wrath of Skarn's own primary reactor. Embedded within the message was a virus, tiny, elegant, devastating. Before the crew could react, internal defense systems activated on their own. Doors sealed. Life support failed. Artificial gravity reversed in some sections. The ship's own point defense turrets opened fire inside the hangars. 93% of the crew perished in under 15 minutes. Those who survived only did so by sheer luck, stranded in compartments without control over their fates. Wrath of Skarn drifted helplessly in orbit. Humanity hadn't just anticipated the Annihilators. They had infected them before they were even deployed. Captured engineers later confessed under interrogation that humans had infiltrated Dominion shipyards years earlier, laying the groundwork for precisely this moment. It wasn't improvisation. It was patience. The Dominion tried to accelerate construction of other Annihilators, but trust had collapsed. No one could guarantee that the next ship wouldn't also turn on its own crew, and every dockyard worker, every logistician, every code slicer now operated under suspicion. Production slowed to a crawl. Meanwhile, humans continued their silent war. New reports filtered in. Mobile turret platoons seen prowling abandoned battlefields. Swarms of micro-turrets clogging Dominion weapon barrels. Entire ships shredded by mines that looked like harmless debris. In one sector, a Dominion cruiser detected a massive human fleet approaching. They prepared for battle, only to realize the fleet was empty hulls. Ships gutted of everything but engines and explosives, piloted by simple AI programs set to ram anything that locked weapons on them. There were no pilots to kill, no prisoners to take, Only wreckage and psychological trauma. The Dominion's military doctrine shattered completely. Defense budgets were redirected toward internal security. Special units were created to hunt supposed human infiltrators within their own ranks. Paranoia metastasized into civil conflict.